Welcome to the Educating Kids and Connecting Families podcast. I'm your host, Christine Furman, a homeschool mom, entrepreneur, and educator with over 20 years of experience in the areas of elementary and special education. It's my mission to provide your family with encouragement, inspiration, and connection. I'll equip you with resources and expert advice to help you effectively educate your kids in a fun and meaningful way. If you value education, quality family moments, and community, you're in the right spot. We'll discuss all things parenthood, education, homeschool, ways to balance it all, and so much more. Join us each week as we empower you to raise kind, confident, and independent kids while building community and connection. Welcome to episode 43 of Educating Kids and Connecting Families. I'm your host, Christine Furman. And today I am recording this episode on October 15th, Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day. So today I have the honor of sharing my story. And this is the first time that I've done this publicly, going through the entire pregnancy story. So from the time I find out that I was pregnant to our loss that we did have for our first pregnancy. So I'm going to be sharing this story with you. But what I want to also just share with you is today is a day that we remember our babies that we couldn't hold, the ones that we couldn't carry any longer with us, the ones that we were never able to meet, the ones that were born sleeping, the ones that we held and we didn't get to take home, and even the ones that we did get to take home, but we had to say goodbye to them far too soon. I just want to say that you're not alone in an experience like this. This happens very often. It is hard, it is heartbreaking. But the biggest thing is you're not alone. When I went through this experience, I did feel alone. There were not many people that I knew that had experienced a loss like this. I was able to share my story, and other people told me about losses that they had, but there was not many people that had a loss in my immediate family. In my group of friends, they didn't experience a loss. It wasn't until I started talking to other people that I worked with that they would talk about, well, their friend or their sister or, different situations that did come up. And then it wasn't until after this happened to myself and my husband that, I started hearing stories from other friends or seeing other moms in my community that were going through losses. And I just feel for them. I feel for every single one of them. I feel for every single mom that has to go through any kind of a loss, whether it's a pregnancy, an infant, or a child, or an adult child. No matter what, a loss of a child is a difficult situation. So today, I just want to start off by saying you're not alone. And I want to send love and prayers to the parents and families that have grieved, lost pregnancies, children, infants, or maybe you are in this situation right now. So just sending all of my love to you. And I just want to share my story with you today and hope to encourage those along the way, and just know that you're not alone and you can share your story, and you are amazing. You are an amazing mom. And just the biggest thing is we're here for you. Our community, the Educating Kids, Connecting Families community, myself personally, I'm here for you, thinking of you, praying for you, and you and your family, because it's a traumatic experience. And I don't think that we have enough time to grieve that loss. And that is something that I'm going to talk about at the end of the episode for sure. That, after I've gone through it, because at the time I was kind of young. I mean, I didn't really know a lot that I know now, of course. You think back to these situations and you're like, oh, wow, probably would have done that differently. Probably would have, reached out and got additional help or support. but I just didn't know at the time. So I hope that I can encourage someone and support someone right where you're at, right in your journey, wherever that may be. But I'm just going to start with my story. Here it goes. So we got married in July 2013. Yes. And that whole year that we had been planning our wedding, and then even after that, my husband was in South Korea. He had to travel a lot for work. And he was in South Korea most of the time that I was planning our wedding. And as a type A person, that was okay because I kind of knew what I wanted to do. And I would just, talk to him periodically and like, are you okay with this? And yeah, that's fine with me. And I would just go about the planning stages, of the wedding. But it was still hard. I mean, we're ready to get married. And here we are. My husband's not even there to experience a lot of that with me, but he was definitely there for the most important parts. And then we know that he has to go to South Korea again the day after Thanksgiving, all the way until January 10th. So that's our first year of being married, newlyweds. And I am going to get to see him for Thanksgiving, luckily. But then he's leaving the next day. He wasn't going to be there for Christmas. And in my family, Christmas is the biggest holiday, just celebrating and family. And we're Italian. So we have a huge Christmas Eve celebration. And that was hard, definitely. But I'm also so grateful for the family to lean on during that time. And then he wasn't going to be there for New Year's. So it was just like those first things as a newlywed. It was like, oh, this kind of stinks. So what happened was, during that time, we had little time to communicate. We didn't have a lot of time to talk, definitely different time zones, of course, all the way across the world. The best way for us to communicate was via email, and that was kind of difficult. I am such a verbal processor. To communicate via email or text is just not my thing. I am so much like a voice message person, but I had to find ways to pass my time, right? It was during this time that was like, okay, what am I going to do? Of course, it was the holiday season. So busy during that time. But before he left for South Korea in November, my husband and I went to a CrossFit with my uncle as a trial. So I think at this time, the CrossFit gyms were really starting to get more popular in our area. And I just remember going because my uncle, he is such a fitness guy. He is into all the things. He just went rock climbing in Colorado. So he just always was that fitness guy. And I was like, yeah, let's try it out. Let's see what this is all about. I always have been into fitness, but I'm also like, I don't know, I like to dance. I would rather do Zumba than, some hardcore lifting, I guess. But I do know the benefits of it. So what happened was we go for this trial. I enjoyed it. And I said, well, you know what? Let me see if maybe this is something I want to do while he's gone for 6 weeks. It would be something, one, to pass my time. I would be able to go to work, come there after work, get my workout in. Number one, I'm passing time. And number two, here's the reason that I wanted to was like, I wanted to be in the best shape of my life for whenever he returned. Like, those stories to me are so cool that when your husband comes home from, a leave or anything, and you're like, oh, here I am. And that was kind of one of my goals was like, yeah, I'm going to be in the best shape for when he returns. Now, we just got married. I mean, I was in pretty good shape at that moment too, but to kind of, amp it up a little. So that was the reasoning here. But before I did the CrossFit, there was a little voice in my head that said, you should get a pregnancy test just in case, because this is an intense workout and you should just check it out. So I go to the store, and at that time we lived in Monroeville and my family and everyone lived in the Hopewell area. So that was about an hour away from each other. So typically I'm not going to see a ton of people when I go to the store near my house in Monroeville, right? Typically. But I go to the grocery store, I pick up a pregnancy test, a few other items, and who do I see but my husband's best friend? And I was like, oh my goodness, like here I am with the pregnancy test, like kind of embarrassed at that point, Didn't want him to see, didn't want him to ask any questions. And luckily, I got out of there as quickly as I could. I was able to get it into the bag before saying hello. And I don't think that he noticed. So that was something that all of these things, as I go back through this story, these are parts of the story that I just remember being part of my story here. So I remember going home and I remember it was a 2-pack and I took one test and it was positive. And I was like, no way. There's no way. So I take the other test and it was positive. I mean, here I am by myself, probably 9 o'clock at night, jumping around like a crazy person because I'm pregnant and I have no one to celebrate it with. My husband's not there. Like, he's the only person that matters when it comes to celebrating in that moment. And he wasn't even there. And so that was exciting, but also a little bit hard. And at that point, I couldn't even call him. So I had to email him a picture of the pregnancy test to tell him. That's how he found out our first pregnancy. So it was definitely unusual. It was definitely a different kind of a start to this pregnancy. But as I continue to go through, I told my mom because we worked together at the school at the time. So I told her the next day. And of course, so excited. She's so excited, but I don't want to tell too many people, right? Still very new. I just found out. So I'm not telling many people, but I do remember like within a few days, she came in with gifts and a baby book and baby name books. And I mean, I'm just getting so excited at this point. Like, oh my gosh, I'm having a baby. And I mean, guys, I was all in. I was eating the pregnancy snacks. I was like, oh my goodness, my pants don't even fit anymore. I mean, guys, I was probably only 4 weeks at this time. Like, they should have fit just fine. I think I was just a little bit bloated, but I was like, man, I am pregnant. I am all in. I am like showing already. This even happened my second pregnancy when I had my daughter, too. I got my maternity pictures and I was like, "Oh my goodness, look how big I am. I can't wait." And then no, I was not big at all. So, but I just remember all of these feelings, of like, yes, this is what it's about. And I remember a typical December day in Pittsburgh, they're calling for inches of snow. And I remember being able to talk to Dan at that time, and he recommended parking our car at the top of our driveway because we had like a sloped driveway and we cleared it out so I can park in the garage most of the time. But he said, you know what? I don't want you to have to shovel the driveway, so park at the top because I worked an hour away from where we lived. So I had to get up extra early. I had to beat all the rush hour traffic because in Pittsburgh, I had to go through 2 tunnels to get through the city to get to the other side of town where I worked, which was crazy. So I would leave at like 6 in the morning so I could get through the tunnels and get to work by 7, even though I didn't have to be there until 7:45 or so. So he said, just park at the top so you don't have to worry about shoveling. And I said, no, it'll be fine. It's not going to snow that much. How often are they right? Well, guys, it snowed a lot in Monroeville. And guess what? It did not snow that much in Hopewell. So here I was in Monroeville with a decent amount of snow. The schools in the area that I was living in were on a snow delay and they had plenty of time to shovel out their cars or whatever they needed to do. And here I had to be at work on time because Hopewell did not have it. Here I am, pregnant, right? Maybe 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks, somewhere in here. Couldn't be that much. But still, I bundled up, put on my snow pants or jacket or whatever, my ski outfit. I don't even know what I had at the time. And I go out and I shovel the driveway. And it wasn't long, like super long, but it was long enough that it took me a while. I remember getting pretty hot and a little overheated, but thinking like, it's fine. I'm still very early on, I'll be fine. The reason I tell you this is because it's this moment later on that comes to fruition. I'll explain a little bit later about the snow shoveling. So I go through the rest of this, right? I shovel myself out. I get to work, we go through this. Well, now Dan's ready to come home. Now it's like Christmas has happened, New Year's, now it's January 10th. And I am so ecstatic that he's home. Like I am now at this point, 5 to 6 weeks because it was about 6 weeks since he left and since he got back. And so I should have been about 6 weeks pregnant at this time. And he came home on January 10th, and I wanted to celebrate with all of our friends and family because he missed Christmas. So it was like, well, how awesome would it be to be able to give him a Christmas brunch and be able to make a ham and all the fun Christmas fixings and just have a great time celebrating. And then on top of it, be able to tell everyone that I was pregnant. So I was so excited for this. I'm planning it. I didn't get a tree that year because we only got real live trees, and I didn't get a tree because Dan wasn't home. So I buy this little tiny tree and I decorate it. And then I made a gift for everyone that was there. So got like little spoons and forks and little baby books. And I wrapped them all up. And I said something like, this is a little something to keep whenever I come to visit you. Basically saying it from the baby. Like, here's a little gift from the baby. And then I had a ribbon around my stomach and I had like, present coming in, I think it was like September. So, I mean, I was all in. I was so in. I was telling all of our friends and family, I was like, you know what? If anything were to happen, like, I want them to know. Well, the morning of the party, I experienced some unexpected bleeding. And I remember telling Dan, and I was like, I don't know what this means. Of course, remember, I'm still pretty new at this. I'm trying to read the baby books, I'm trying to do the things, but I don't really know. You just do it, you just don't really know all the things. I didn't at the time. So I said to him, I don't know what to do. I don't know what this means. And I don't know if we should cancel or if we should just go for it and just do it. And I was like, in the back of my head, I'm like, it's fine. Everything's fine. I have such a positive mindset where the glass is always half full. And I'm like, it's fine. Everything's good. And we went on with the party. And it was, of course, a Sunday. So I couldn't even call the doctor. Sure, I could have called an emergency line, but I thought, I'll wait until Monday. It's no big deal. So we decided to go on with the party. All of our family and friends come. We're celebrating. We're having a great time. I brought everyone into our big family room and I gave everyone the little gift that I made them, and I had everyone open at the same time. I mean, guys, we had an entire room full of family and friends, like tons of people in our family room opening little gifts that said I was pregnant and having a baby. But no one knew that I had bled that morning. Like, no one knew that, so everyone's thinking like, this is exciting. Everything's great. And I still thought that too. I thought, yeah, everything is still just great. So Monday morning comes and I call the doctor and I go in for an appointment, and Dan was with me and we do this ultrasound, and she was very quiet. I just remember just being very quiet, just moving it around. And at that time, I'm still thinking like, I'm pretty early. They don't necessarily do ultrasounds that early. So maybe they just aren't seeing something. Again, not negative at this point. I'm still very positive because, like I said, at this point in my life, not many people had experienced a loss, or if they did, they didn't talk about it. So for me, my mind was still focused on this growing baby that was inside me and the next steps of just having a baby. Like, the thought of the loss was never there. And I do remember her saying to me, "Are you sure you're as far as long as you think you are?" And I was like, well, of course. Dan was gone for 6 weeks. So I had to be at least 7 to 8 weeks at this point. And still just very quiet. I believe she stepped out of the room. Again, a lot of this is like just trying to think back to it all. And I believe she stepped out of the room, maybe came back in and was like, okay, you know what? Why don't we just wait and schedule for you to come back? And I think they wanted me to come back in a week. But to be honest, we were planning to go to Las Vegas that long weekend and into that week. And they were like, well, just come back in 2 weeks then. And I was like, okay, like no big deal. And again, I walk out thinking still, I'm pregnant, like everything's still fine. And we go on our Las Vegas trip like we had planned because we planned this trip as a celebration after he finished this South Korea job and this trip. And again, I'm still thinking I'm pregnant. I don't do any drinking. I don't do anything, crazy. Obviously, not going to do anything crazy anyway. But I remember even going for a massage and just telling them that I was pregnant and they'd used more safe ingredients or didn't have me lay on my stomach directly or different things like that. Just remember just being so careful. And to be honest, I'm glad that I thought I was still pregnant while I was in Vegas because that trip could have been totally different if that doctor's appointment said, you had a miscarriage. And we would have either had to cancel our trip, which is a possibility, but we had it all planned, or we went on that trip and it was a totally different outcome. Because at that time, we were still happy. We were still in a good headspace thinking that we were pregnant and we were going to have a baby in, you know, 9 months. So we get back from our Vegas trip, we go to our follow-up appointment, and they did the ultrasound. And I just remember just eerily how quiet it was, just complete silence. And she's just, doing her thing. And now at this point, I might be getting to that point of like, is everything okay? And she left to go get the doctor. And I'm not sure if the doctor came in or what happened, but I just do remember them taking us to another room. And that's when the doctor definitely came in. And that's when she told us. And she said, you had a miscarriage. There's no heartbeat. The baby's only measuring to be about maybe 5 to 6 weeks. And I think at that point that was really hard. That's where I was really in shock. That's where the tears just started coming. And I was just in denial. Like, no, that can't be. That's not right. I'm pregnant. Like, I'm going to have a baby. And of course, that's when the blaming started happening. And I don't know if anyone that's gone through this situation has ever blamed themselves, but I know that I did. And I know I blamed that snow shoveling day where I overheated myself and I overexerted myself. Why did I do that? Why did I not just park the car on the top of the driveway? Why did I not just do X, Y, and Z? And I know in my heart it wasn't that. But in that moment, you're just trying to blame something, some situation as to why could this be happening? It's not fair. It's not right. Could it be that there's a reason? I don't know. No matter what, it's hard. So we then go through and we may have had a couple, I don't even know how long. It may have been a week, but I know they scheduled a D&C that was recommended at the time. And now that I've researched it, now that I know, I don't know that I would recommend that. I didn't know at the time. I was a little bit naive and I just kind of did what they said to do. But now I've gone down such a holistic route that I definitely don't think that that would have been my first choice. So I just encourage you, if you ever find yourself in a situation like this, just research it. Don't always listen to the first thing that someone says. Find out what it is. I had no idea what it was. They just say D&C. All right, you have a D&C scheduled. Well, I don't even know what that is. So just research it and find the best option for you and your family. Hopefully you never have to go through this, to be honest. I mean, that's my prayer, that no one has to experience this. But the reality is It happens far too often. And, find out what the best route is. Do you want family with you or do you want to be alone? Do you want to have a surgery or do you want to pass it at home? And maybe that's not an option. I have known people that they were full term. And guys, I couldn't even imagine. I could not even imagine. So my heart completely goes out to every single mom out there that has had to experience any kind of miscarriage, whether it's been early on, whether it's been further along, full term, after a stillborn, any situation, my heart totally goes out because even my situation, 6 weeks in, obviously you can tell it's still hard for me to share this story. And just because it's a little bit heartbreaking. So I remember going into surgery that morning. It was pretty early in the morning, and my mom and Dan were there. So Dan and I went, and then my mom met us there. And I don't remember much of the surgery itself. I remember they stayed in the waiting room, and I had to go in the back. And I don't really remember anything after that, except waking up in the recovery room and just crying. And just thinking to myself, like, I was pregnant when I came in here, and now I'm leaving not pregnant. And that to me was so awful. And like I said, I just couldn't imagine other situations. So please know that my heart goes out to every single one of you. And if you haven't gone through this, thank God for that. But you probably know someone that has. So just know that I'm extending my love to absolutely everyone that has experienced this. So that surgery was scheduled on February 14th, 2014. Seriously, the worst Valentine's Day ever. So I remember coming home, and Dan was the absolute sweetest, total rock star. But the worst part was we just laid in bed and we just watched TV the whole day. But every single commercial that I saw was a baby commercial, a diaper commercial, families that were so happy. Oh my goodness, I can't tell you how much I cried that day. I mean, just so emotionally exhausting. And then the worst part is that my husband and I both have gone through a traumatic situation. We lost a child. And from what I recall, it was very much like, of course, my work, I know that they gave me so much grace. But still, it was very much like, you should show up the next day. It's just very much like, all right, time to resume normal activities, even though you just lost a child, regardless of how far along you were. It's still a loss. And that to me, as I've just thought about this episode, was I going to share my story here? As I'm talking about it and thinking about it, that to me right there is heartbreaking because I don't know what anyone else's work does for a miscarriage. And if your work does give you bereavement time, I would love to know that because I don't remember any kind of talk like that when I had a miscarriage. And maybe things have changed since then. And I hope that they have. But to go through a traumatic situation like that, to have to take sick days for days that I needed to go through a surgery, needed to recover, and then have to just resume normal activities as normal and go to work like everything's fine. Again, I had so much grace from my employer during that difficult time, and I'm forever grateful because I had a great community. But going into a different situation or a different work environment, even my own work environment that was primarily women, I was a teacher, right? So primarily women, they rallied around me. They supported me. They lifted me up. I got cards. I got love. But I know at that moment, it was so easy for me to fall into depression. And for me, that was never something that I felt that I had, right? But I just remember like, oh my gosh, how easy could it be for someone to fall into depression after a traumatic situation like this? Or not. I mean, everyone has their own situation. But for me at that moment, that's what I felt like. Like, oh my gosh, I don't want to get up. I don't want to get out of bed. I want to stay in bed and cry all day and just curl under the covers, and I don't want to talk to anyone. Now, remember, I also didn't have any kids at this point. So I can't even imagine families that have had miscarriages, moms that have had miscarriages with having other children. So please just know my situation was very early on and before kids, but I know every situation is so different. And I feel for each of those situations. But I took Fridays off, I took Mondays off so I could just have a long weekend, so I could just snuggle up and stay in bed. I didn't want to go to work. And then I had an hour-long drive and I would just cry. Every time I thought about it, I would just cry. And it was hard. And I know grief hits all of us completely different. And we all handle it and manage it differently. And at that time, I didn't know how else to handle it. Could I have got therapy? Probably. Probably would have helped me a little bit. But at that time too, it was very much like, okay, this is what happened to you. Move on. Like, what's the next thing? And of course, that's not how I feel now, right? We take those moments, we grieve, and we heal from it. We need to heal before moving on. But definitely one thing, like I've mentioned, is I do not think that we as women get enough time to grieve the loss of a child, especially if we are working. No matter how far along, it's still a very traumatic situation. And I know that I can't speak for anyone, but I believe that there should be bereavement time allotted for moms that encounter a loss of any kind. And I pray that you never have to use it, but it definitely should be there for us. So if you have experienced a loss, if you have someone in your life that has experienced a loss, please just extend my love to them. Please give them a hug. Know that they're not alone. Know that you're not alone. Well, I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to share my story with you. I hope that my words are encouraging to you and to everyone that you may know, to remind you that you're not alone in this journey. Often we encounter these situations, these experiences, and we just don't even know who to reach out to. So please know that the Educating Kids and Connecting Families community is always here for you, always here to lift you up, to support you, to hear your story, hear your voice, because your story matters. We all have our own story. And if you have a story that you would like to share, please feel free to reach out to me directly or head over to the Facebook group and share your story and get uplifted by all the moms of the world, because you are not alone. We are here for you. We are here for each other, and we're here to get connected and be supported. I'm sending you love, hugs, and prayers today on your journey, wherever that may be. And one final thing that I would love to just kind of know and ask is that if you have experienced a loss in any kind of a way, how do you choose to honor and remember your child? Whatever way that may be. I have one final story that I want to share with you, and this may sound a little bit far out there, but it goes with this story and I just have to share it. So I went on then to have Ella and Alex after that miscarriage. And when I was pregnant with Ella, we had a nanny while I was working, and she would come to the house and she would do crafts and, do all kind of fun things with Ella. So anytime that they would be playing, Ella would be playing in her play kitchen with her phone or whatever. And she would always say she's talking to Thomas. And she said, "Who's Thomas?" And she never really had an answer. She was young. I mean, she was probably 1.5, 2 at this time, maybe not even 2. Yeah, 1.5. And she would always talk about Thomas. That was her imaginary friend. And eventually one day when they were coloring, she said, "Well, what color is Thomas?" And Ella said, "He's white." So I'm not sure if my little baby boy was Thomas or if Ella just had an imaginary friend, but because I didn't really think about it, I just know that I experienced a loss and I needed to heal from it. But maybe my little girl saw her brother that we lost before she was born. So there's my story. I would love to know your story if you feel comfortable sharing it. I know sometimes it's hard to share hard stories, but I do know that it helps the healing process too. So if you have a story and you'd like to share it, I am here for you. You are not alone. You are an amazing mother. And I just want to send you so much love today. Thank you for listening to the Educating Kids and Connecting Families podcast. I appreciate your support and cherish each and every listener. If you found value in this episode, download it, share with a friend, or leave a review. If you're interested in even more resources for you, activities for your kids, and connection, I encourage you to join our exclusive community, Educating Kids and Connecting Families with Christine Furman on Facebook. You can find the link and any other links mentioned in this episode in the show notes below. I'm looking forward to connecting with you and supporting your family.